British Petroleum Oil Company is listed under the New York Stock Exchange and the London Stock Exchange as BP. They are the third largest energy company in the world. They are headquartered in London and operate in over 80 different countries. Their largest division is BP America, which is located in Houston, Texas. It is the largest producer of oil and gas in the U.S. BP was founded by William Knox Diarchy in 1908 when he struck oil in Iran. When new leadership took over in 1935, the name changed to Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. In 2005, an explosion at a BP oil refinery in Texas killed 15 workers. In 2006, an oil spill in Alaska let out 250,000 gallons of oil across the North Coast, which led to a partial shutdown of the company. BP's main competitors are Exxon and Chevron.
In 2009, there was a lot of debate on whether BP can maintain the high dividends they were paying their shareholders. Some analysts suggested that it might be the next Enron. BP had a lot of safety issues. In 2005, a refinery in Texas City, Texas, blew up, killing 15 workers and injuring 170 others. The company paid $1.6 billion to settle private lawsuits from the incident. The company vowed to address all its safety shortfalls. Yet, in 2006, an oil pipeline badly maintained ruptured and spilled 200,000 gallons of crude oil in Alaska. After the Alaska incident, the company settled a series of criminal charges and agreed to pay $370 million in fines and once again promised to fix up all their safety issues. BP's history has been filled with violations. The company has 13 major safety violations since 1999. They were cited 8 times in 7 years by the Environmental Protection Agency for Alaska operations alone. Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which are better known as OSHA, fined BP 750 more times than any other oil company. BP was also handed the largest fine in OSHA's history of $87 million after inspectors found 270 safety violations that were previously cited and 439 new ones. Congressional hearing provided evidence that BP discouraged workers from reporting safety and environmental problems, and that some employees faced retaliation for reporting problems. With all the safety violations that BP has, it was authorized to drill in the Gulf of Mexico after promising it could stop leaks 10 times larger than the one occurred in the Gulf of Mexico.
On Tuesday, April 20th, 2010, at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, news broke that an explosion occurred on BP's Deepwater Horizon oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico near the Louisiana port of Venice. This would be BP's strategic inflection point. According to the Coast Guard, 11 of 15 crew members were reported missing at the time of the blast. The rig was drilling but not in production, according to Coast Guard reports. A day after the explosion, helicopters and ships resumed the search for 11 missing workers. The oil rig remained burning throughout the night, producing oil slick more than 30 miles long. Later that day, the fire was finally extinguished. However, the oil rig eventually sank. The Los Angeles Times reported the incident to be one of the worst U.S. offshore oil accidents in the generation. Underwater video has also captured 2 additional leaks, dumping an estimated 1,000 barrels of oil per day into the sea. Stopping the leak is so technically challenging that experts realize it could take months to contain the leaks. One solution they begin to try is setting the oil slick on fire. However, in doing so, it releases a huge plume of smoke into the sky. The initial surface slick has been reduced. However, further research has shown that the estimated 1,000 barrels of oil being dispersed into the sea is actually closer to 5,000 barrels of oil per day. BP begins to install a shutoff valve on one of their 3 leaks. However, the process becomes even more complicated than anticipated. Furthermore, oil slick appears to be drifting towards Alabama, Florida, and Louisiana's southern tip. BP's second plan is to place a 4-inch tube where the leak is to begin to draw oil to the surface. Gradually, the speed is increased to draw more and more oil produced from the explosion. Expert research done by the Coast Guard has estimated at least 1.6 million gallons of oil has been dumped into the sea since the explosion.
The cause for the BP oil spill has many factors. It was a sequence of poor judgment and carelessness that has led to such a horrific disaster. The deadly blowout of the oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico was triggered by a bubble of methane gas that escaped from the well and shot up the drill column, expanding quickly as it burst through several seals and barriers before exploding. Workers set and then tested a cement seal at the bottom of the well. They then reduced the pressure in the drill column and attempted to set a second seal below the sea floor. A chemical reaction was caused by the setting cement, which created heat and a gas bubble, which destroyed the seal. Workers who did basic pressure testing on the seal didn't perform a second and more expensive test to ensure that the well was properly plugged. BP did not follow the proper safety regulations and inspections that they were supposed to, which ultimately led to this disaster in the Gulf. The rig also had been drilling deeper than 22,000 feet, even though the company's federal permit allowed it to go only 18,000 to 20,000 feet deep. BP failed to communicate that additional depth to the cement crew, who therefore poured in too small a cement cap for the additional pressure caused by the extra depth, so it blew. And it's ironic that a group of BP executives were on board the Deepwater Horizon rig celebrating the project's safety records when it blew. BP CEO Tony Hayward's first reaction to the Deepwater Horizon oil rig explosion in the Gulf of Mexico that killed 11 men was shock. He had no idea how it could have possibly happened. He soon enough, though, did what any CEO trying to preserve his company's image would do. He blamed someone else. He was quoted by saying that the responsibility for safety on the drilling rig is Transocean. It is their rig, their equipment, their people, their systems, and their safety processes. We will deal with these issues in the fullness of time. Today, we're focusing on the response. But as I've said, the systems processing on drilling rig are the accountability of the drilling rig company. He knew the public wanted answers and wanted to hold someone accountable for the disaster, but Hayward did not want the blame to fall on BP. He tried to lessen the damage to BP by spending the estimated $6 million a day to make sure the oil leaking from its well doesn't make it to shore, and push the Transocean is accountable line as often as possible. After the accident, BP teams immediately set to work to stop the leak at the source, plan relief wells, and develop a suite of options to stop or contain and recover the flow. Within weeks, they had begun work on the drilling of 2 relief wells that would permanently stop the leak. From the beginning, BP worked to fight the spill and minimize its impact to the environment by containing, removing, or dispersing the oil offshore, and by implementing strategies to protect the shoreline and clean up oil that came ashore. Together, these efforts helped to reduce the amount of oil that reached the shore and environmentally sensitive marsh areas. The response involved the mobilization of approximately 48,000 people, the coordination of more than 6,500 vessels, and the deployment of approximately 2,500 miles of boom to contain or absorb the oil. Both the spill and the cleanup have cost the company a significant amount of money.
The total cost is estimated to be around $40 billion. This cost is made up of compensation to individuals and businesses affected, cleanup costs, seafood safety and testing, fines, and a marketing campaign. Even with this huge cost, since the third quarter of 2010, the company has produced a net profit. BP has raised the $40 billion cost by selling off some of the company's assets. Here is a chart of BP's stock price over the past 5 years. As you can see, in 2010, before the disaster, the stock price was around $60 and then plummeted to below $30. As of June 1st, 2011, the stock rebounded and closed for the day at $42.34. BP is also no longer allowed to issue dividends to shareholders. Maybe worse than the financial cost was the effects on the company's public image. This is a mission statement found on BP's website. It says, BP wants to be recognized as a great company, competitively successful and a force for progress. We have a fundamental belief that we can make a difference in the world. We help the world meet its growing need for heat, light, and mobility. We strive to do that by producing energy that is affordable, secure, and doesn't damage the environment. BP is progressive, responsible, innovative, and performance-driven. This, however, is not what the company is known for. BP is known as an irresponsible, profit-driven company that clearly isn't too worried about the environment. The Obama administration worked in collusion with BP at first to try to keep the full impact unknown to the public. It took over a week for Obama to address the full impact of the disaster because it became too large to hide. BP has spent millions of dollars trying to minimize the negative publicity of the disaster. At first, BP deployed hundreds of thousands of liters of dispersant Cortex to try to keep the oil slick off the ocean surface where it's easily seen. Cortex is banned in Britain because it's known to be toxic to sea life. This just proves they're more worried about their image and making profits than doing the right thing. This has turned into the biggest environmental disaster in U.S. history. Meanwhile, BP continues to try to blame others for their mistake. They recently placed a lawsuit against Transocean for the $40 billion cost, claiming they were negligent and they should be blamed. Going forward, BP needs to stand by their word. They must revive their public image. To do this, they need to be more socially responsible and improve their safety habits.